From corporate logos to our cell phones and remote controls, the modern world is full of symbols. Though we use them every day, it's easy to take their meanings for granted, and most of them have much stranger origins than you might imagine. Many reach back thousands of years and contain a complex patchwork of history and culture. Today we are exploring 15 symbols with unexpected meanings. At this point, Apple products are everywhere, but the story behind their infamous logo is much more complicated than people commonly acknowledge. The company's official statement about the logo states that the bite on the right side is meant to differentiate the icon from a cherry. But those who knew Apple's founders, Steve Jobs and Ronald Wayne, have a different story to tell. They claim that Jobs and Wayne were inspired by two different influential scientists. The first, of course, is Isaac Newton, who allegedly conceptualized gravity after an apple fell from a tree and struck his head. But the second story is much darker. It involves Alan Turing, the famed British mathematician and computer scientist. Although he was widely recognized for his brilliance and his ability to unlock complex Nazi codes in World War II, Turing was also persecuted for being homosexual. This was a criminal offense in Britain at the time, and after months of torture and estrogen injections to cure his homosexuality, Turing took his own life by eating a cyanide-laced apple. The founders of Apple Inc. were so inspired by Turing's intelligence and martyrdom that they made their logo a tribute to his work. These symbols have been in common use to differentiate restrooms since the 1960s, but very few people know their true origin. The male symbol has a dual meaning. One can be traced back to alchemy and astronomy. It was simply meant to represent Mars, a planet considered to be male in antiquity. Earlier versions of the symbol involved a dot in the center, which was meant to represent the sun. The other explanation is that the arrow represents an iron-tipped spear, while the circle represents a shield. The female symbol has similar connotations. The Greeks associated it with their most celebrated goddess Venus. They also conceived the symbol to represent a mirror or a wheel for spinning cloth. Both of these objects were considered distinctly feminine at the time. There is a lot of misinformation surrounding this icon. Some claim that it is anti-Christian, a Satanist mark, or even that it has associations with the Illuminati or the Freemasons. But the truth is much more simple than that. By the 1950s, nuclear weapons were increasingly prevalent among most Western countries. There was also a huge public backlash in response to such events as Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The British Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament decided they needed a symbol to make their movement more cohesive, so they hired artist Gerald Holtom to design it. He explains that the symbol is meant to depict the letters N and D inside of a circle. Holtom also described the symbol as representing despair, with the central lines forming a human with its hands questioning at its sides against a backdrop of a white earth. The symbol has outgrown its original meaning, and now is the universal sign for peace. Every smartphone prominently displays the Bluetooth icon, but do we really know the meaning behind the symbol? It turns out the logo has a very specific symbolism. Bluetooth technology was invented in 1994 by the Swedish firm Ericsson. They felt indebted to their Norse history, so they chose a logo with the ancient Norse symbol for H combined with the symbol for B. You might be wondering why they chose these initials. The answer is they represent Harald Bluetooth, a famous Danish king who was famous for uniting many tribes during the 10th century. Because the company wanted their technology to help unite people, they chose Harald Bluetooth as a model. This symbol is simplistic and universally recognizable, but most people would never guess that it has very intellectual literary origins. This symbol has its roots in both Greek poetry and music. When poets or composers were writing verses, they inserted a symbol called a caesura to represent a place where the performer would pause and take a breath. The marking was simply two vertical lines, so when media companies were designing their controls, they chose this caesura to represent pausing whatever was currently playing. Since then, the icon has been recreated in everything from remote controls to iPhones. This is another ubiquitous symbol with a very academic meaning. The background may seem very obvious if you're a computer programmer, but for the rest of us, the answer is not so apparent. If you know anything about code, you understand that information is compartmentalized into binary, or a series of zeros and ones. A 1 represents an open functional circuit, while a 0 represents a circuit that is deactivated. So when designers were deciding on the appearance of a power button, they chose a single line to represent on, and a circle to represent off. The symbol we know today is a line inside of a circle, which is meant to represent standby. Now this binary code is present on almost every electrical device in production. The Nike swoosh is one of the best-known logos in human history. Most people associated it with sports stars or fashion icons. Many falsely believe that it represents a check mark for completion or correctness. However, like many of the logos on our countdown, this symbol reaches back to antiquity. In Greek mythology, Nike was the goddess of victory. She lived closely with Zeus and would fly in a divine chariot over battlefields and give glory to the victors. The goddess Nike is depicted with a palm branch or wreath symbolizing peace and victory. Eventually, the curvature of Nike's wing came to be a common stand-in for her likeness. The wing of goddess Adidas Nike also came to symbolize speed and suggest impressive physical ability among both athletes and warriors. So it will come as no surprise that Carolyn Davidson, a close friend of Nike founder Phil Knight, used this wing as a symbol when she was designing Nike's logo. As Greeks would say, when we go to battle and win, we say it is Nike. The intent of Nike was to be the footwear that lifted the world's greatest athletes to new levels of success and skill. The Nike swoosh embodies the spirit of the winged goddess who inspired bravery and strength in ancient Greek warriors. The ampersand is another common symbol that we see in typography every day. The etymology of the symbol can be traced back to Old Roman cursive in the 1st century AD. Back then, the letters A and E were combined to represent the phrase "and per se," or in addition to. Over time, the combination was slowly transformed into its own character. The character lasted more than 2,000 years. It was adapted from Roman to Latin, and then Latin to English. In fact, the ampersand was considered the 27th letter in the English alphabet until the late 1800s, when it became a special character which simply means "and." Now we can see the ampersand in such prominent brands as H&M, A&E, AT&T, and M&M's. Though we now associate it with Valentine's, jewelry, and candy, the heart symbol has had a long and complicated journey to reach its current cultural meaning. Of course, the symbol doesn't look anything like a biological heart, so how did it reach this absurd design? The truth goes all the way back to 6th century Greece, when the symbol was used to represent the heart-shaped fruit of the silphium plant. Strangely, the main use for the silphium plant was as a contraceptive, or even to induce abortion. After enough time had passed, the symbol came to represent sex, as it was associated with birth control. Fast forward more than 1,000 years to medieval Italy, when the first known image of the heart was used as a symbol for love. The 13th century painting depicts a suitor attempting to charm a noble lady by giving her his heart. Of course, now much time has passed, and companies like Hallmark have transformed the symbol into the universal sign for love. This is one of the most ancient and culturally significant symbols on our countdown. It dates all the way back to 400 BC, when Chao Yang, a revered Taoist philosopher and poet, described it as a school of naturalist thought. The image was inspired by sunlight moving over mountains and valleys, so that the sun is always lighting some part of nature and obscuring the other. This in turn represents the many dualities that exist on Earth, including fire and water, expanding and contracting, and good and evil. But the Taoists were also certain to include a spot of the white in the black and vice versa. Each of the colors is flowing into the other to represent the interconnectedness of all things, and the fact that you cannot have light without the darkness. Though there are many different interpretations of this symbol, yin and yang have largely maintained their original meaning until today. The OK symbol has very different meanings depending on where you live in the world. For most of the Americas and Europe, it's a synonym for the word okay, but in Southern Europe it can be interpreted as an insult, meaning that you are equal to nothing. In much of the Middle East, it's a stand-in for the evil eye, which is considered a curse. However, the hand signal's history actually lies in ancient Buddhist and Hindu mythology. When an image of Buddha or a Hindu god performed this gesture, or mudra, it symbolized an openness to discussion and to the universe. Though the semantic meaning has shifted some, the OK symbol now essentially means that things are all good. From Harry Potter to high-voltage signs, this symbol is universally understood to represent an electrical current. Perhaps it is so universal because its origins are prehistoric. There have been many instances of Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens scratching this petroglyph into caves that predate human society as we know it today. The first human explanation of this symbol came from the Roman philosopher Heraclitus, who said that the lightning bolt was a gift from the Sky Father that steers the course of all things. Of course, it is very closely associated with the Greek god Zeus, who was depicted throwing lightning bolts from his perch on Mount Olympus. This image was so integral to Greek culture that they had it printed on all of their coins as early as 234 BC. This is unquestionably the most offensive and inflammatory symbol in our modern world. After the Nazi Party chose it as their logo, it became inseparably associated with the travesties of the Second World War and the Holocaust, and it still persists as a logo for fascist movements all over the world. But the swastika used to have a very different meaning. Tracing its origins, the swastika was first documented more than 5,000 years ago as a Sanskrit symbol meaning good fortune and well-being. The character was popular all across Asia, Siberia, and most of Europe. Though there are slight variations between the cultures, the associations were universally positive. The most common explanation for this symbol is that it represents the North Star and Sun rotating around a central axis. These celestial bodies are used for guidance, and the symbol implies good luck for those who see it. The Gucci logo is debatably the most instantly recognizable in the fashion world. The iconic double Gs have been a fixture of celebrities and the world's elite for almost a century, and the history behind the design is pretty straightforward. The House of Gucci was founded in 1933 by Italian fashion designer Guccio Gucci. He'd been working in an upscale hotel when he noticed the elegant and luxurious baggage that most patrons used. This inspired him to start his own luxury brand with his 3 sons, and of course the logo simply represents his initials. From these humble beginnings, Gucci has become one of the biggest names in fashion. It grosses more than $6 billion every year. Most of us use a USB connection every single day. From our cell phones to iPods, cameras, and batteries, most portable devices have a USB port. But what explains that strange trident icon on every cable? If you look close enough, you'll see that the tips of the trident have a circle, a square, and a triangle. This was meant to represent the fact that USB could connect many different devices and use them harmoniously. But why a trident? The answer is that in antiquity, a trident was considered the most versatile weapon. It was appropriate for both hand-to-hand combat and long-range warfare. Though the association with violence seems confusing, it was the spirit of versatility that USB's creators wanted to convey.